Welcome to the Business of Property podcast. I'm Simon.
And I'm Stuart.
We're both property people running our own businesses. This podcast is just us chatting, as we often do, about anything and everything property. So this week, we are, I think, going to start with Stuart's adventures in finding your next personal property. And I think recently you had you went to a viewing for a property that's actually just around the corner from where I live and where I am now.
That's right.
And had an interesting experience. So
yes.
Do you want to start off running through that?
Yeah, we shan't mention road names. We'll protect the innocent.
As I know what's coming, I do fear that you could almost have been walking around my house. But anyway, go on, you carry on.
No, I'm pretty sure it wasn't, because I can see your house from the video chat. It was one of those viewings that just didn't start well, I think. For very reasonable reasons. The vendor wanted us to ensure we were wearing protective clothing, which of course we were doing anyway. However, both the estate agent and the vendor proceeded to show us around the property. But the challenge for us was it was a 4-story building, and we're looking at a 5-bed because I've got 4 kids, and we want to give one of them, the twin girls, their own rooms. And although it was a 5-bed, it's very hard to describe, but it was basically like I can only describe as a prison tower, because there was just zero space in it. The garden, as you know, in these areas, and I've lived on this development myself, so I can say this confidently, the gardens are very small, and you accept that for usually what you get as in terms of the house space. But this garden was still the 3 meter square that we would have expected. But the challenge was, everything was just very tightly enclosed. Now, and you can imagine, we were greeted with, once the door opened, the greeting wasn't particularly warm and friendly. It was, make sure you don't touch anything when you walk around. That was, so you don't feel particularly positive as a start. But all of the rooms just had various things chucked in them. So as I said to you before the recording, one of the rooms, which, I don't know, it was a couple of meters wide and let's say 4 meters long. So a small thin room, which they kind of had dressed as a living area, I guess, but it just about fitted a 3-seat sofa in it, and then had a treadmill next to it. So if you can imagine, we've got the vendor, the estate agent, and then my wife and I walking around his property. We walked in, and then you couldn't go anywhere. And it was kind of like, that was the whole viewing. It was just shuffling around people. And when we came out of the property, we gave some sort of instant feedback to the estate agent and said, look, that probably would have been a lot easier without the vendor. Because I don't know how you feel, but whenever I've viewed properties, and I've shown people my properties before, I did it for the studio flat. But what I do tend to do is essentially just say, there's the front door, you go in, you have a look around, do what you need to do. And if you've got any questions, you can come back and ask me, so that you're not applying any pressure. Because as a potential purchaser, it does feel a little bit awkward, because it's someone's personal space and you don't want to say anything negative. So there is that sort of little bit of awkwardness, and you kind of feel that you want to be polite. What do you feel about that?
I don't think I've ever been on a viewing where I've just been let loose in the property, except when the property's been completely empty. Obviously, there's properties that are for auction and they're empty, or where the previous resident or sort of current owner or whatever no longer lives there. And those ones I've certainly sort of been let loose by the agent at the front door and said, go have a look and come back when you're ready. And particularly with auctions, that seems to be the standard, because often they're a sort of an hour's slot and they've got lots of people turning up. So everyone's looking around at the same time. But I've had a very mixed sort of experience with vendors, as in sometimes, as you say, they seem a bit offish and unhappy that you're looking around their house. And this is before COVID times. I haven't actually done any viewings since the pandemic started. So that can be a bit off-putting when the vendor is sort of hovering around, looking slightly unhappy that you're there. But also, I've had very, very good viewings with vendors present. So you can ask questions, which is always quite good, and they've got the real experience without any spin from the agent. And they're sort of happy to tell you about different things and invite you up into the loft and things like that, and show off the extra features that they're very proud of in their property and things, and it can definitely help, I think. And from my own point of view, I quite like having a little bit of a sort of tour guide, if you like, around the property, whether that's the agent or the vendor, just because you can ask little questions and check details on things as you're going around. So I think I don't know. I mean, when you're going around on your own, you obviously have more freedom to sort of linger and really look at the details. But
yeah,
I don't know. I think I'm on the fence. Sorry.
But I don't think it's an either or. I just wondered what your experience was in terms of vendors. So interestingly, and I've just remembered that we looked at another property on the same development, and that too was a vendor viewing, and that viewing was, I would say, much better. I mean, she just walked us around the house as you'd expect, and we asked the question. So I completely agree. Also, another viewing, just on your point around having a tour guide, I completely agree. We had a really, really good estate agent take us round another property, and I'm calling that out because we don't say it often enough. But he was really good, a young guy, and if I can remember the estate agent's name, I would share it. But what I really liked about him, he was just very calm, and of course, the thing is, we don't need someone to say that's a toilet, that's a kitchen, because we know. And he kind of just said, look, obviously you can see what the rooms are. And I think he set the tone. He said, what I'll do is I'll just show you around the house just to give you an indication of what it is. And he did that. He took us into each of the rooms. And if we had questions, like you say, we asked them. And once we got to the last room, he said, right, I'm just going to leave you here. I'll go back down. So at least you can just have a wander around and get a feel for the place. And it was really good. And we actually went to view it the second time the following day, and he was back again. And he was just so, so good. And that made a difference. I think for me, the vendor viewings can feel, like I said, just a little bit more awkward, because what you don't want to do is, say anything disparaging like, car parking looks a bit awkward, because you feel like it's a personal affront and you don't want to upset that person. And finally, the second vendor viewing was a bit like that. The parking wasn't great. And bless her, she did her bit in terms of trying to sell the property to us in terms of, well, it's great for commuting. And then, so she did that bit. So, so mixed reviews. I think it's more not necessarily the person or the situation. It's probably how it's approached.
Yeah, I think you're right. And as you say, you can actually get viewings that are sort of a bit of each. And perhaps that's the best of both worlds. So you get a bit of a tour guide, someone who's happy to answer questions, but also some space to explore on your own.
Yeah.
So speaking of exploring, I think you have gone beyond this slightly awkward viewing and found some others. And you have one that you have as a preference. Have you actually made offers and progressed that far, or you just have a short list?
Yeah, we've kind of got down to a short list. We're looking at new builds now. In fact, to be transparent, we did put an offer in back in September on a property, which was accepted. But then we've kind of reviewed it because it wasn't going to be ready until mid next year, which wasn't the key reason. There were a few other reasons. But the interesting thing I think to share, and hopefully will be of interest to the listeners about us making the offers, is that currently we rent. And obviously, because of this program, because of this podcast, we do own other properties. So I have property in limited company and property in personal names as well with my wife. And we have rented now since basically the start of 2017. A little bit before, actually.
Three-ish, no, four-ish years, something like that.
Yeah, it's coming up to, I think we've been kind of out since Q3, Q4 of 2016. But the galling thing for us is obviously we're looking like a lot of people because we're talking about stamp duty holidays, which is something else for us to talk about. But because we haven't had what's termed as a primary residence for over 3 years, we still have to pay that additional stamp duty. So obviously if we're looking in the south and south east, that the first 500k attracts 3% charge, and after 500,000 it attracts 8%.
Yeah, so the normal 5% plus the 3% of the additional charge. Yeah.
So so for us, even now, yes, there still could be quite a big saving, but there will be still stamp duty to pay. So I'm just bringing that up because I think that's interesting for anyone else that might be. I have heard of a couple of people that have moved out of their, let's say, marital home and gone somewhere else and rented out their home because they've either gone traveling or they've moved away for work or whatever. And that has happened too. So I'm raising it because it's still quite an interesting one, because it's a question that does come up. So, which is, do I need to pay stamp duty? And the answer is most likely yes.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not linked to whether you're buying your own home, as in somewhere for you to live particularly. It's much more linked to, do you have other properties already? And of course, as you say, if you have a main residence that you sell and then you're buying another one, that's sort of a special case, but there's a time limit on it.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, we've investigated a number of different avenues, but they all lead back to paying the tax man, unfortunately. So,
yes. Oh well.
Yeah, but it's, first world problems. We are selling one. We are selling one of our personal properties.
You have last time we talked about an offer you'd had on your Croydon-based flat, which I hope is still in progress. But moving on from that, you've got another offer for your Richmond studio flat. I think this one, isn't it? So how's that progressed, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so fingers crossed on the Croydon one. That's, as far as we know, going through. So we're hoping to try and get that completed before Christmas. It's not been the greatest of projects, to be honest. It's one of those that we talk about, you either succeed or learn. Let's just say I've done a crap load of learning on this particular project. So if we can sell it, I'll be happy. It won't make the money we were hoping to make. The personal flat, we ended up putting on with a second agent. It's in the Kingston area, and we decided to put it on with an agent that has access to the Asian market, i.e. Sort of China, Hong Kong, because and Korea, because there is quite a big South Korean community in the Kingston area. And I thought, why not? Let's have a look at it, because they are native speakers and attract a lot of people. I don't actually know where the investor came from. So the property, as we mentioned before, studio flat, it's around 30 meters square. It was always going to be a property that gets bought by either a first-time buyer or an investor. Just happens an investor came in. We were very fortunate with the estate agent. Again, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to jinx the sale of the property. But when they were walking around, the purchaser expressed an interest, and the estate agent, again, doing a really good job, said, well, if you want to make an offer, but I wouldn't muck around. I would just give them the offer that you think is acceptable, and they offered asking price. So we're happy with that. It was up for a bit higher. We think it's a reasonable price as well, and we know that because there is a comparable property within the same building, and we know ours is better, and we are only slightly higher than that. So we know we are on the market for the right price. It's just a tricky market. So yeah, so that's really good news for us. And again, because it's an investor, we're hoping that concludes before Christmas would be the plan.
Do you know if they're buying cash or with mortgage?
I'm not sure. I want to say, I think they do have a mortgage in principle. Yeah, I'm right again. Well, I'm not naming names, so I know they're going for quite a low LTV. So I think, again, fingers crossed, that would hopefully give it more chance of progressing through the system, because as we know right now, the high LTV products are less likely to succeed at the current time.
Now, you said going through before Christmas. Now, as we currently record, Christmas is less than 2 months away. I think that's very optimistic for something that's only just started. And I think you've been reading some reporting along similar lines, haven't you? Do you want to give us a little bit of an intro to what you've been reading before I add in my anecdotal bits and bobs?
Yeah, definitely. So you're absolutely right. I mean, I am a glass half full kind of guy. I think what gives me confidence on our purchases, just to put it out there, is number one, on the Croydon property, it's a cash buyer, which removes a certain amount of paperwork and bureaucracy, and we are doing everything we can to push that through for a number of reasons. Obviously, we want to sell. We always want to sell quickly, and because the purchaser on Kingston, again, because they're an investor, they're quite keen to get this done. We've been quoted 8 to 10 weeks. We'll see what happens. As you and I know very, very well, and I'm sure most of the listeners to this show know, once it goes into conveyancing, it's a bit of a black box combobulator that can take a bit longer than we would like. That's me being diplomatic today because it's early. I'm going to be diplomatic. But what I was reading over the weekend, which was quite interesting, and this comes from the Director of Delivery at the Conveyancing Association. He said the average time taken to get to a proceedable offer was now 77 days. So just to apply the caveat very quickly there, that is an average. So there'll be lots of variance across that, but we're working with what we've got. So 77 days to get to a proceedable offer. So you're talking about 2 months just to get to an offer. And from there to exchange was another 123 days, which even with my simple maths makes exactly 200 days. Now, whether that's calendar or work days, I haven't clarified, but either way, we're talking.
You've got to hope that's calendar days. I mean, that's just such a long time.
I'm thinking it is. It must just be number of days if you're looking at that. So let's assume that. But either way, it's a bloody long time. And if you think that we're all rushing for March the 31st deadline, well, as it says in the article, which is fairly apparent, is that that takes you well past March the 31st. So,
yeah, I think first of all, I would question slightly the 77 days for a proceedable offer. I don't know quite how they're defining that, but certainly in the recent market, stats coming out of elsewhere that I've seen have suggested that the time on market, so from listing a property to take it off the market with a sold subject to contract or what have you, has been in the region of 30-ish days. It varies depending on the property type and location and things like that, obviously, but the average has been coming down to as little as about 30-ish days. So that's a big difference from 77. But that said, it's still a reasonable while. I mean, 30-ish days, a month, that's still quite a while. And then when you have to add that on to the 120 something days, that's 4 months pretty much, isn't it? For the actual conveyancing process to take place, it's still nearly half a year to sell a property and actually complete the process, which is a long time. And I've seen some headlines elsewhere recently. Unfortunately, unlike you, I don't have the reference material in front of me, so I can't quote it. But I think, yes, I know, I'm sorry, it's a poor show. I think the figures were something in the region of over 350,000 property transactions that they were estimating people were hoping or wanting to try and get the stamp duty holiday or take advantage of the stamp duty holiday, and they were likely to miss the deadline. So that's a lot of property transactions that are going to be saddled with some extra tax if nothing changes to the current deadline for the stamp duty.
Yeah, and anecdotally as well, I mean, I've experienced it. I have looked at a number of products in the last few months, but in equally speaking with people locally, speaking with people in the co-working space, their property purchase fell through because they couldn't get, in quotes, a proceedable offer. So they might have had, I assume they got an agreement in principle. I don't know, but I assume they had an agreement or a decision in principle. But their challenge was, and I believe the bank was nationwide, was that when push came to shove, they couldn't get the final offer. They kept coming back with queries. And I believe, again, this was a 90% loan to value product, which we now know banks are reticent to.
Yeah, that's at the riskier end, isn't it? So.
And the challenge is that what I was reading again is that banks don't want to be top of those charts anymore. So right now they don't want to be top of the interest rate charts because of COVID. I mean, let's leave that one let's park that one. Let's not go there. We don't have the time. If we agree with that that it's all COVID related, not they are busy. There is a glut of people. You've got the perfect storm of lots of people wanting mortgages and probably fewer people to handle them, and also handling them at home because they're not in an office space. All of a sudden, you've got an increased, or so should I say, a lack of capability within or appetite within the banks to want more business right now. So the proceedable offer bit, whilst I think 77 days is excessive, and they're saying that's an average, and I don't know where all the stats come from. I do think it's excessive, but I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility, given what I've seen, read, and heard in the last few months.
Yeah, I mean, in actual fact, just between us, we've got 3 examples. We should probably work out our numbers. Do you know how long your 2 flats were on the market before they received their offers that you are currently hoping to proceed with?
As in from offer acceptance, or from putting it onto the market?
But between the number of days from putting it on the market to accepting the offer.
Well, Croydon, I would say the best part of 3 months.
Okay.
And for Kingston, I would say 2. No, it would have been longer than 2. Probably again closer to 2.5, because I remember thinking it's been on for 10 weeks and we used a different agent. So I would say 12 weeks. So virtually 3 months again.
Okay, well we'll go for slightly less than 3 months, just to try and work it out. So at the other end of the scale, mine was on for 6 days. So
yeah.
not wanting to rub that in or anything, but
well, you are.
Well, when we work out the average from that comes out at 59 days. So that's a terribly small sample with an exceptionally meaningless average, but it's actually longer than I was expecting it to be. So we're more towards the 77 than we are the 30 odd of the other stats I've seen of late.
Yeah. So
interesting.
There you go.
Actually not very meaningful way, but
like you say, it's an exceptionally meaningless stat. I like that. I think we should precede most stats with this stat is exceptionally meaningless, but we're going to use it anyway.
Well, to tease next week, I'm expecting to have some stats ready for us to chat about. Hopefully, they won't be entirely meaningless, but we'll leave that up to the listeners to decide.
You're just hoping that there's no one listening by now, so we can't hold you to account. But I will personally hold you to account on behalf of the listener.
What, to make sure I come up with some very meaningless stats?
Yeah.
I shall make sure that I deliver something close.
It's already gotten very ambiguous.
That's the idea. And on that note, I think it's time that we finish up. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much for listening. And if you've been enjoying the show, please do let someone else know about it, or drop us a quick note or review. We really do appreciate them. And show notes can be found at thebusinessofproperty.com. We will talk to you again next week.